Hello YouTube, we're on the Real Programming channel. It is about HTML and CSS. My name is Andrei. This is our 68th lesson. I greet you. We will talk about how to float an element, and there are no dumb questions. So, question first. So, if I have a block element with a 0 margin and I block element below it with a top margin of 20, the margin between them would end up being 20. Right, if one of the margins is bigger, then the margin becomes the larger of the two, even if one margin is 0, but if the margins are the same, say 10 pixels, then they just get collapsed together to 10 pixels total. Can inline elements really have margins? They sure can, although you'll find that you often don't set the margins of inline elements. The one exception is images. It is very common to not only set margins, but also borders and padding on images. And while we aren't going to be setting any inline element margins in this chapter, we will be setting the border on one a little later. What if I have one element nested inside another and they both have margins? Can they collapse? Yes, that can happen. Here's how to figure out when they will. Whenever you have two vertical margins touching, they will collapse even if one element is nested inside the other. Notice that if the outer element has a border, the margins will never touch, so they won't collapse. But if you remove the border, they will. This is sometimes puzzling when you first see it happen, so put it in the back of your mind for when it occurs. So how exactly does the text works as an inline element since its content is not an element? Even if text is content, the browser needs to flow it onto their page, right? So the browser figures out how much text fits on a given line and then treats that line of text as if it were an inline element. The browser even creates a little box around it. As you've seen, if you resize the page, then all those blocks may change as the text is refit within the content area. We've been taught 7 pages of flow. When are you going to explain that one little property we put into our CSS file? You know, the float to dots, right? To understand float, you have to understand flow. It might be one little property, but the way it works is closely tied to how the browser flows elements and content onto the page. But hey, you know that now, so we can explain float. Here's the short answer. The float property first takes an element and floats it as far left or right as it can, based on the value of float. It then flows all the content below it around the element. Of course, there are a few more details, so let's take a look. How to float an element? Let's step to an example of how you get an element to float, and then we'll look at what it does to the flow of the page when you do. First, give it an identity. Let's take one of these paragraphs and give it an ID. We'd like to call in its amazing floating paragraph, but we'll just call it amazing for short. Now give it a weight. A requirement for any floating element is that it have a weight. We'll make this paragraph 200 pixels wide. Here's the rule. Now the paragraph is 200 pixels wide and the inline content contained in it has adjusted to that weight. Keep in mind the paragraph is a block element, so no elements are going to move up beside it because all block elements have line breaks before and after them. Now float it. Now let's add the float property. This is our code. The float property can be set to either left or right. Let's stick with right. Now that we floated the amazing paragraph, let's take through how the browser flows it and everything else on the page. First, the browser flows the elements on the page as usual, starting at the top of the file and moving over the bottom. Second, when the browser encounters the floated element, it places it all the way to the right. It also removes the paragraph from the flow like it's floating on the page. 3. Because the floated paragraph has been removed from the normal flow, the block elements are filled in like the paragraph isn't even there. 4. But when the inline elements are positioned, they respect the boundaries of the floated element, so they are flowed around it. Notice that the block elements are positioned under the floated element. That's because the floated element is no longer part of the normal flow. However, when the inline elements are flowed within the block elements, they flow around the borders of the floating elements, behind the sense at the long. Now you know all about flow and how floated elements are placed on the page. Let's look back at the long and see how this all fits together. Remember, in addition to setting the elixirs div to float right, we also move the elixirs div up just below the logo at the top of the page. Moving the div float us to flow it to the right and then have the entire page flow around it. If we had left the elixirs div below the music recommendations, then the elixirs would have been floated right after most of the page had been placed. All these elements flow the elixirs in the HTML, so they are flowed around it. Remember that the elixirs div is floating on top of the page. All the other elements are underneath it, but the inline content respects the elixirs borders when they are flowing into the page. Also notice that the text wraps around the bottom of the elixirs because the text is contained in a block element that is the weight of the page. If yours doesn't wrap, try narrowing your browsing window until the text wraps underneath the elixirs. Exercise: move the elixirs div back to its original place below the main content, then save and reload the page. Where does the element float now? Check your answer in the back and put your elixirs div back underneath the header. Answer will be next lesson. Nice stuff. Do you think I am going to watch these fantastic long designs and not want you to improve Starbus? You got a blank check, take Starbus to the next level. And it looks like we've got a new achievement. Starbus really could use some improvement. Sure, you've done a great job of creating the typical top to bottom page, but now that you know flow, you should be able to give Starbus Coffee a sleek new look that is more user-friendly than the last design. We do have a little secret too. We've been working on this one a bit already. We have created an update version of the site. Your job is going to be to provide all the layout. Don't worry, we'll bring up you to spend on everything we've done so far. It's nothing you haven't seen before. The new Starbus. Let's take a quick look at what we've got so far, starting with the page as it looks now. Then we'll take a peek at the mark and the CSS that's styling it. We've got a header now with the new specified Starbus logo and the company mission statement. This is actually just a GIF image. We've got 4 sections: the header, a main content section, a section advertising something new called the bin mention, and a footer. Each section is a div that can be styled independently. It looks like we've got one background color for the page as a whole, and then each div is using an image as a background. Here is the Brave Bean Machine area. This links to a new area of Starbucks Coffee where you can order your coffee beans online. Sorry. This link doesn't work just yet because you're going to build the bean machine in an upcoming chapter. Here is the footer. It doesn't use a background image, just a background color. Notice that we styled the links in an interesting way with dotted underlines. A look at the markup, and we'll talk about this in the next lesson. And this is our 68th lesson over. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Please like, share with friends, comment. Eat bananas, chocolate, and nuts. Drink more water for the effective work of our brains. Bye.